Okay, so I've shifted over a little bit now to my computer, and I actually want to show you some of these things that I just referenced in when I was standing up about this final paper. So this is the assignment section right there, assignments, and the very last assignment, because by date they go up, the way they're listed now, is the final paper. And so when you click on the final paper, what you're going to do is get some instructions that tell you to be sure to read it in detail, the instructions. And the instructions for the final paper are actually going to be an attachment. So I'm going to click on that attachment right now. And it should open up pretty quick here. Hopefully we'll be able to see it. Comes. Okay, let me get this back down here. So here you have the instructions for the final paper, and so a lot of this goes over what I just mentioned. It has different sections to it. It has a first part, and it will also describe about how long it typically is. So the first part, double space, is typically 2 to 3 pages. That's about what it takes, and it's about choosing your character and presenting them by giving a clinical description. And in that clinical description is the stuff I just mentioned. I mentioned mental status exam. It may be a little hard to see it, but when you open this up, you'll see it. Significant symptoms using the brief psychiatric rating scale and a brief history. And I reiterate that. Note, it's okay to fabricate additional background history as needed. For example, a movie may not describe a character's family history, so you may need to make up that information for the sake of your clinical workup. So the first section is describing your client, and then the second section is making a differential diagnosis by listing all the diagnoses that you've decided fit one or more. There could typically, you wouldn't see more than 3, but it's not uncommon to see 2. And so you do that in this second section here. And you also list diagnoses that you considered but ruled out, and then provide a rationale for why you ruled them out. And then the next section is providing theories, etiology, and treatment theories using the biopsychosocial model. So that's where I left off that last tape. So by etiologies, it says, please describe what you believe are the biopsychosocial etiologies that make up your client's symptoms and diagnoses. To understand the biological, which I wrote genetics, substances, could be medical situations. Psychological, which I wrote patterns of thinking or feeling, etc. And social, which the way we're framing that is limited social opportunity. So one of the isms like sexism, racism, ageism, poverty, social stressors. Something that the client is sort of compelled to be in a particular social niche that that feeds into their mental disorder. And so that would be a social etiology. You might need to go beyond their history and do a little bit of research. So, for example, if you decide that a person has major depressive disorder and it runs in their family, well, there you have biological genetics. But you may want to punch in biological etiologies for depression, and you're going to see things like cortisol, stress hormones having gone so high that they've depleted serotonin. So it's almost always low serotonin or low norepinephrine. So that may require a little bit of research. And then treatments also are next. And so it's the same idea, biopsychosocial treatments. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But that's the third section. And then the idea is that now, assuming you're not going to use a treatment that's kind of recognized in a practice guideline as something that should be effective for the diagnosis you've chosen, what would be your ultimate treatment? What would you do if you had unlimited amount of money, personnel and could rework any social policy, what would you do to help your client given their presentation? And people in this section, it's anything you could do. You have created islands, with health spas, and all that's good to go. The treatment before it, in the treatment section, we're looking for what are called practice guideline-based treatments, which means treatments recognized to have some effectiveness with the diagnosis that you're presenting. So I'm going to slide back up to this paper and talk about this mental status stuff again. So in those pages in Chapter 2, in the resources section of Essential Psychopathology, it goes on for a long time, and I really recommend reading them. But there's also the possibility of using forms that I've posted for you in the resource section. So I'm going to shrink that, and I'm going to go to our class to the resources there. And it's going to be a little hard to see this because of the print, being so small. Maybe I could try to zoom in a little here for you. Let's see if I can get this a little bit for you. This is definitely a challenge. Okay. There's something that says MSE, Mental Status Exam Introduction, MSE Option 1, MSE Option 2, MSE Option 3. And instead of writing up a narrative description of the different mental status presentations, you could use one of these forms. So MSE 1 is just a checkoff list: appearance, speech, attitude, behavior. There's just checkoffs to use. The second one is similar. There it is. It's the option 2, it's better in that it has a lot more options to check off in these various areas. Same idea, thought process, appearance, speech, mood, affect, thought process. So you could just check off option 2, or there's an option 3 too. Also a type of a checkoff list you could just circle. So I want to be sure you know that those are in there in the resources section. The other thing in the resources section is that thing I told you about that has the movies, Films Illustrating Psychopathology. I'm going to pull this back out now a little bit. There you go. So this claims to have anxiety disorders, all of these movies. This was made a few years ago, so they're not really, really recent movies. But there's so many under what they claim to be anxiety disorders. And then it goes into a different class of disorders, mood disorders and suicidality. And so you have this as a resource too if you can't think of a specific movie that you might want to use. Now the whole point here is if you do choose one of these movies, you're going to want to watch it, so hopefully you can stream it or find it somewhere. But also you can't necessarily count on the diagnosis here being the correct diagnosis. You're still going to want to do the same workup for the paper that you would do if you didn't have this brief bit of information. But this could definitely help give you ideas. So that's another piece that's in the resource section. So again, we're back here in the resources for your class that list all the other different resources. So I'm going to stop here once more and do a third section just to finish off this paper, and then encourage you to post questions you still have about the paper on the Ask the Instructor section in the forums. So I'm going to change that to Ask the Instructor about the final paper, and I'll respond to those. So there's one more section, and then we'll move. That'll be it for this. Thank you.